and gentlemen, here we go. One of my favorite stories of the year, if not, could be the favorite story for me of the year. I absolutely love this colonial period, era of exploration, early settlement, early colonies. And if we think about what's going on in the world, what are the 3 G's that are driving European exploration and colonization? Yes?
Gold, glory, and God.
Excellent. Gold, glory, and God. And who would you say is the most successful out of European empires when it comes to creating colonies in the New World? Yes? Spain, right? Spain is rolling in the dough. They conquered the Incas, they conquered the Aztecs, and things are going well for Spain. They're a superpower. After, though, that the Spanish Armada is defeated, Spain is kind of on the ropes, and England and Great Britain, that they later turn into, is going to rise. So what was England, Great Britain's first attempt at a colony in the New World? Yes? Roanoke. Excellent. So we had this colony of Roanoke in which 3 waves of settlement. You had kind of 15 soldiers disappear. Some people went back with Francis Drake in order to try to get out of the colony. Then 117 settlers go, along with them men, women, and children. I'll be stumped if someone remembers this. What was the name of the young girl, the first English girl born in the Americas? Excellent, Virginia Dare. Very, very good. 10 points, Ravenclaw. There we go. Virginia Dare, right? And they completely disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to them. So if we think about that, are people going to be, absolutely in the ports, ecstatic, ready to go to the New World? No, right? It's dangerous. It could be absolutely terrible. So there's a period in which people don't really try colonization. 117 people disappear. Yeah, I think I'll do something else. And in 1607, we have the Virginia colony. One of the things that the English do is they set up something, ding, 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 need to know test question on final exam, a joint stock company. So the Virginia colony, the Virginia company, is something known as a joint stock company. That is something in which you have a pool of investors that only give maybe 1/10, 1/20th of their total wealth in the case that if the colony fails or disappears or is not profitable, they don't lose all of their wealth. They're still economically viable. Does that make sense? So you would give 1/20th, you would give 1/20th, you would give 1/20th. And it's like Oprah, but you're giving me 1/20th for the colony. And if we think about it, that protected people from financial ruin. With that money, they would hire ships, they would buy supplies, they would purchase land, and that's one of the things that went wrong with Roanoke. And they're also going to make a lot of bad decisions early on. Does that make sense? Is the second attempt at colonization by the British, by the English. And this is in 1607 at Jamestown. Well, in 1607, so you can imagine, in the 1580s, this is when they tried Roanoke. They finally try again in 1607, and this is the first permanent English settlement in what is the United States. It was created by the Virginia Company, and it was named for King. It's called King James. Excellent, excellent. And if we look at it, you can see that there's a captain that is going to be really become in charge of this expedition, lead them through what's called the starving time, who's only 27 years old, same age as me, which is interesting to think about. John Smith, and he paints with all the colors of the wind. John Smith did not have a relationship with Pocahontas. If he did, that'd be quite scandalous, because I believe she was like 10 to 12 years of age. So that would be quite horrible, right? But John Smith is a fascinating guy. John Smith, similar to Miles Standish, who founded Duxbury, was someone who fought in wars against the Ottoman Turks. He fought as, I believe, a cavalry officer for the Austrians. He was a mercenary who was used to fighting in wars. So the Virginia colony hired him as a way to protect the colony, someone who was a bit of a Chuck Norris, kind of could do it all, protect the colony. And what ends up happening is they don't bring the people that they need. They don't bring farmers. They don't bring tradesmen. They don't bring blacksmiths, coopers, people that will sustain your new colony. What they bring are gentle men. Literally men that don't do labor, that don't work with their hands, that collect rents and things like that. And these gentlemen, they come over, they don't bring a lot of provisions, they don't bring a lot of supplies. They say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to trade with the natives while we go and conquer and find gold and silver and get super rich. I don't know if you guys have ever been down to Virginia, but can you pluck gold and silver from the Virginia hills? No, this is not the Aztecs or Incas that they think that they're going to find. What they get is they have Powhatan natives who live very similar to the natives around here. They don't have massive cities or gold and wealth. What they have is, kind of a traditional tribal lifestyle that they encounter. So, of the 104 colonists original, only 38 of those original people that show up survive. That is intense. You can think about the early years of colonial Virginia. There's a lot of disease, there's starvation. Things get very, very, very grim, very, very fast. These aristocrats end up building a fort to protect them. This is their settlement. And if we look at where Jamestown is actually built, what do you notice about it, right? That if we look at the way this is positioned on this old map, there's a very small strip of land that connects Jamestown to the mainland. And you can imagine if natives are trying to raid your settlement, you're naturally protected by water. When the tide goes out, they would have to cross through that muck, that nastiness in order to get to your fort, but you can still walk back and forth between the mainland and your settlement. Also, right off of Jamestown is Deepwater Port. You can have large ships coming in and out, you can have trade, you can have protection, you can have gunboats, which really helps the colony thrive and survive later. Does that make sense? And of course, what is their main goal when they're coming to the New World, these aristocrats? They want to find cha-ching, cha-ching, silver and gold. So it's not that time yet, but it feels good. It feels good. These aristocrats, unknowingly though, show up in one of the, if not the worst droughts in Virginia history. The natives that they plan to trade for are starving themselves. There's not a surplus of food to take from. So these aristocrats go out into the Virginia countryside. They're looking for silver. They're looking for gold. They're getting into battles with Native Americans. It's getting absolutely terrible. And John Smith becomes governor of the colony and rallies them and says, "He who does not work does not eat." And we'll talk about the starving time in which he stays in from and starts to rally. And this starving time is absolutely horrible. When I walked into Jamestown, I absolutely love going there. You cross this bridge, and when you cross this bridge, it's all mucky, terrible, nasty marsh. There are snakes, there are turtles, there are frogs, and there are also insects. And insects carry what?
Diseases.
Horrible diseases, right? These are Englishmen. They're not used to the Virginia swamps. So they start dying like flies. They have starvation. They have dysentery. So much is coming out of one end that they can't drink enough water in order to keep up, and their internal organs fail. They are truly dying left, right, and center. Add that to the fact that during one of these droughts, they can't trade with the natives. The natives actually surround their fort and attack them in the winter of 1609 to 1610. So you are starving, you have no food, you cannot leave your fort without being picked off by natives, and you have all of these diseases that are wiping you out. Roughly 75% of these colonists are going to die off during this time. Absolutely terrible situation. And one of the reasons why this is getting so bad is there was actually a ship that was supposed to bring them food, men, supplies, and restock them, get them vitalized. That ship crashed into Bermuda. Those people were actually surviving in Bermuda, trying to repair the ship, trying to go to Jamestown, and they also were, just surviving themselves. They were living off hunting pigs, eating crabs, hunting birds. And it's actually going to be them that later talk about Bermuda and create the British colony of Bermuda. Cool side note, there's one gentleman there named Stephen Hopkins who actually crashed into Bermuda, survived there, went to Jamestown during the starving time, went back to England, and then crossed on the Mayflower and settled Plymouth. This guy has the most epic life I have ever heard of. He is a true survivor in a sense that is hard to imagine today. So during this starving time, though, something fascinating that happens is, you see this little graveyard? The settlers are walking by, they see a fresh grave, and they go, you know what? I have nothing in my stomach. I am so famished that, my mental state is that of a wild beast. What I'm going to do is I am going to dig up the recently buried dead, and I'm going to consume them. They actually resorted to cannibalism to survive. There's reports in which that they were taking the people that were recently buried, bringing them up, and consuming their flesh. And we do have evidence of this in the skull of this young girl here. This girl is Jane, who was 14 years old, probably recently dead due to disease or dysentery. They didn't kill her and then eat her. They probably ate her after she died. Was actually executed for eating his wife. It's like, hey, where'd your wife go? I don't know. Hey, where'd your wife go? I don't know. Supposedly he was eating her. They found out about it and they executed him for it. This is actually a source from 1624. Take this source and the validity of it with a grain of salt, but here's what they said. I'll read just a quick passage. And one amongst the rest did kill his wife, powdered her, and had eaten part of her before it was known, for which he was executed, as he well deserved. Now whether she was better roasted, boiled, carbonadoed, I know not, but of such a dish as powdered wife I have never heard of. Could you imagine? You go home, be like, darling, you look ravishing. And that ship from Bermuda and other ships actually started showing up. They were like, yeah, we are pulling a Roanoke during the second expedition. We're leaving. We're out of here. Please, just take us out of here. We are dying left, right, and center. Everyone has disease. They're dying these horrible, dysentery, diarrhea deaths. Natives are picking us off. We want out. They actually board the ship. They're starting to set sail when into the harbor sails a gentleman by the name of Lord Delaware. Lord Delaware shows up with arms, men, and a plan to save the colony. And he says, turn around. We're taking this colony by storm. We're going to fortify the settlement. We're going to go inland. And we're also going to launch the Anglo-Powhatan Wars, in which Lord Delaware and his lieutenants end up having a series of engagements with the natives, pushing them further and further inland, and there's mutual slaughter back and forth. It is an absolutely atrocious war where there's a lot of death and an extreme amount of violence. It wasn't just men on the front lines. This was attacking homes, villages. You also would have natives raid our settlements, our towns in Virginia. A nicer note, though, is we get, hey, there she is, Pocahontas. Pocahontas married a gentleman by the name of John Rolfe. No, it's okay. John Rolfe, not John Smith. She becomes a Christian. She changes her name to Rebecca, That's her Christian name. She actually goes to England and has a few kids. And some people nowadays are descendants of Pocahontas and John Rolfe. I believe someone check me on this, but I think Nancy Reagan was a direct descendant of Pocahontas. It's pretty cool to think about. But John Rolfe, need to know, muy importante. John Rolfe brings something to Virginia that is going to turn it from a failed colony to the most prosperous colony out of the 13. And that is, dun, 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 what do you think it is? It is the foundation of the American experience in British South. It is tobacco. Yes, it's actually tobacco. People were going crazy for tobacco in Europe. They absolutely loved this stuff. It was exotic. It was a symbol of wealth. People like Sir Walter Raleigh would actually smoke it fairly often. They weren't vaping it at that time, though. They were just smoking it. So John Rolfe brings brown gold, and they end up making a ton of money. And if they're starting to make a ton of money, what will that attract from the old world? People, right? We now have a means to make money. There's access to land, there's access to wealth, there's access to prestige, and now Virginia went from Roanoke 2.0 to now the source of British wealth and the New World that will sustain the growth of the American South.